Welcome to our podcast, proudly brought to you by VPA Australia, our trusted supplement provider since Unity Gym started. As sponsored athletes, we're excited to offer you a special 10% discount on top quality supplements that ship worldwide. Just use our discount code from the description. To avoid international shipping fees, contact VPA and tell them we sent you to get a flat shipping rate. Today's episode is also sponsored by the Flexibility Blueprint. Ever felt lost in the sea of social media fitness advice? The Flexibility Blueprint is your map to progress, designed to help you get laser focused on what matters most for your journey in flexibility and strength. And guess what? It's free. Grab it using the link in the description. If you're starting your flexibility journey, don't miss our 20-minute mobility routine. It's your first step to quick wins in flexibility. For those further along, use our Flexibility Masterclass, featuring advanced techniques like loaded stretching and end range strength for the pancake, front splits, middle splits, and more. Links for both are also in the description. And for the seasoned athletes, avoid the frustration of complex training puzzles with our UMS Tribe membership. It's a different online coaching experience with strength and flexibility combined. Don't forget, we're Amazon affiliates too. You can find all the equipment used in our videos and podcasts at the most competitive prices with our affiliate links in the description. Now let's dive into today's episode. Today we've got the Brains Trust. I've got Phil White, our resident physiotherapist, and I've got my brother Yani, and we are going to be talking about how to construct the perfect workout. Now that's a joke. There is no perfect workout, but there's the workouts that what we've found work really well for us and work really well for our tribe around the world. They were tried and tested at Unity Gym with folks that had only 1 hour to train, and we had to try and cram as much as we could into an hour to make people strong, flexible, fit, resilient, and also overcome old aches and pains and injuries. So I've got the team here today. How are we, guys?
Very well.
I'm good. Woohoo. I'm good. So Yani and I started talking off camera about what we were going to talk about today, and I said, no, let's just press record and we'll talk about it. So what I think we should start with is we should talk about the way that we do a workout structure in the sense of warm-up, primary workout, and supplementary exercises first, and explain the reasons why we do that order, because that's really talking about the hierarchy of needs. And then we can talk about the way that you can have alternating exercises to increase or decrease complexity. And then, Yani, we can talk about the minimum workout, goal workout, and ideal workout.
That didn't make sense. Increase or decrease complexity. Do you mean increase or decrease?
Yeah, increase or decrease. No, complexity. Like to go to more complex movements or less complex movements to make things more challenging or less challenging, you know?
Okay.
So if we talk first about the workout structure, because it's funny, we do this, we've done this stuff for so long, and you kind of forget that we take it for granted that we understand like the hierarchy of needs. And the way that we do things in the UMS and in our workouts is we always start with a warm-up, and you know, the warm-up is hopefully self-explanatory. It's basically there to prepare you for the workout and prevent injury. And warm-ups they should be workout specific. So a warm-up for a boxer would be different to a warm-up for a runner. And because in the UMS we do resistance training with weightlifting and calisthenics and also flexibility, we have a warm-up that we have found to work really, really well. And the main guideline that we have for a warm-up is we try to keep a warm-up less than 10 minutes. Because the warm-up isn't the workout. The warm-up is to prepare you for the workout. And I think if you're going to be limited with your amount of time, you don't want to be waffling around with a really, really long warm-up. And so what we do is we do a little bit of cardio first. So high intensity cardio. So the idea, like the very first part of a warm-up is to elevate the heart rate, you know, to get the blood circulating, because you come from this state of rest where your blood is prioritizing things like digestive function, brain function, and you know, we only have the same amount of blood, but at resting state, our body it limits the amount of blood flow to the extremities and to the muscles, and it uses it where it needs it. And we need to.
I like this idea of sentient blood. Yeah. That the blood is deciding. I think that's
the sentient blood. Yeah.
Sorry, just maybe.
Okay, maybe
phrase it.
Wrong way to phrase it. Then. So how should I phrase it?
I guess like the blood flow is sent to where it's needed. Yeah. Probably more by the.
That's right. Yeah, the cardio, the heart is pushing it where it needs to go. Yep.
Yeah, I have sentient blood.
But so what happens is as soon as you elevate your heart rate, the body starts to send blood into muscles and into muscles to basically be able to create contractions, and all these other things happen, like your blood vessels dilate, and there's a whole bunch of processes that go on that prepare you for exercise. What's the fluid that gets synovial fluid, is it, that gets either released or it gets softened? I can't remember. I haven't read up on my biomechanics and biology for a while.
The warm up has 3 goals, man. It's to raise your core body temperature and get blood where it's needed, saturate the joints with synovial fluid, and then you want to prime your nervous system and neuromuscular system for the types of movements that are about to occur under more stress. So if you're squatting, you want to prime the body to squat. If you're deadlifting, you want to prime the body to deadlift. If you're doing push-pull movement patterns, you want to prime the body for push-pull movement patterns, and, upregulate the I guess, neural drive to the sort of rotator cuff and things like that. So let's keep it simple. This is not a podcast about warm-up.
And I think it's so, but it is really important, because I just see it all the time with people getting that idea of like specificity of warm-up wrong, because I was talking to a guy who's really into his calisthenics and mobility, and then he was sort of talking about his like running warm-up, and he's doing full-on like bodyweight squats with like full range of motion, going through this like elaborate thing and being like, oh, isn't it silly that all these other people don't do warm-ups like that? I'm like, well, I don't do that, because with running I first walk, and then I briskly jog, and then I'll start run at the desired thing, because basically, like, if you're going through these like end of range of motion warm-ups, like, and your body's not going to be doing that in the actual activity itself, then it's sort of superfluous. Like, it's a nice thing to do to expose yourself to movement variability, but if that's a barrier to then going out for a jog, I think people kind of get that bit wrong, and then they over-index on how important the warm-up is for injury prevention rather than the macro loading picture, so the actual program, and then the sort of intensities within it. So I just think it is important to understand that when I was working in professional AFL, like, those guys would do an hour-long warm-up because they'd be changing direction, sprinting, jumping, diving, like getting tackled, like producing force, all these different things. So you need to expose your body to loads of different types of force. But when you're getting in the gym and you've got a very structured workout, upper body push-pull, like, do the things that will warm you up for upper body push-pull.
Yeah, when what Rad said at the start, there's one really key factor there, is the warm-up is not the workout, and we all have limited time and we have limited energy supply to produce the levels of intensity that we need to in the workout. So let's not use a warm-up protocol that really has a negative impact on the workout
itself.
Friction.
Like, you just don't want to add friction.
Exactly. Yeah. I do see people doing that. Look, I think there's one of two people at the gym. One doesn't warm up at all. I just see them walk up, and the first, they look like their max squat would be 80 kilos and their first squat's 60 kilos. That's the first thing they do to warm up. I'm like, oh God. And there's the worst. I see people that just load up a max lift and go for it, but then there's on the other hand, there's those that spend half of their hour warming up, before they actually get into their workout. So you need to find something that's very specific to what you're going to be doing on that day. And, hopefully you're getting into the gym, or you're doing your exercise regime frequently enough that you don't need to do everything every day. You can have a bit of specificity each time. But let's move on to the next phase of the workout. And also, I want to just quickly say, one thing we do need to cover here is the principle of load management at some point in today's discussion, because if you're like me, like I went and let off some steam boxing last week on Wednesday, and I was still not recovered today. I've had a stiff lower back and issues with my shoulders ever since, just because I went too hard for what my body could handle at the moment. And so people need to take that into consideration too.
Well, we'll talk about load management at the end. It's something we've never covered before on this podcast. Hopefully Phil can pull something out of his hat. So if we move on, so you've got the warm-up done. Warm-up is absolutely top of hierarchy of needs because it prevents injury, basically. So then we move on to the primary workout, and the primary workout is basically where you do the majority of your work. Like, it's where the goal of your workout is catered for. So if you want to build muscle in your upper body and you're doing a workout to do that, then the primary workout is where the big movements that are going to build muscle in whatever muscle groups that you're trying to target. That's where that happens. So the way that I like to think of a primary workout is that's where your compound lifts happen. So a compound lift is where multiple joints are being used in the lift. So for example, if you were doing a bent arm strength vertical push-pull workout, which is where you're pushing things and pulling things vertically, so think shoulder press and pull-ups, you do your shoulder press and pull-ups in the primary workout, because if you leave the pull-up, for example, to do in the supplementary workout when you're already fatigued, the pull-up has such a huge demand on neural drive, on energy, on strength, that if you're fatigued in any way and you can't already do very, very good pull-ups, it's almost going to be impossible for you to do good pull-ups. So that's where we do the main work, and usually the primary workout, at least the way that we do it, that's where we usually do the most sets as well, the most volume. We usually do between 4 and 6 sets in the primary workout, usually, not always. And that's also where we put our flexibility work in as well. And a part of that is because we're going to talk about this a little bit later, is because it taps in really well with the minimum workout. Because when we talk later about the minimum workout, you can just do your warm-up and part of the primary workout and still get most of the work that you need done to achieve your results. Over to you guys. Anyone?
Yeah. Prioritizing what's most important is really important, you know. And if we go a little bit more macro, if you look at your training split, you should be taking that into consideration too. If your goal is to get a bigger squat, then you should be squatting early in the week and maybe even multiple times a week, but depending on your level of experience, you know. And that also, on an interest workout perspective, is very important. You know, what's the most important exercise or movement that you're doing? To keep it really simple, you know, you want to front load that. Phil, what else?
Yeah, I think like when thinking about what actually happens when you're looking for a strength adaptation, there's 2 factors. There's going to be that neural drive that Yani briefly mentioned in as part of what you're doing in the warm up, and that's basically the amount of brain signal you're sending to your motor units, which the motor units are the innovation, like the nerves that are innervating each of the muscle. But like basically you have like small motor units and large motor units, and the way that people can pick up cars off babies is if all of their motor units are all activated all at once, which is really hard to do. There's like this thing called Henneman's size principle, where it's very easy to activate the small ones, and then it's harder and harder to activate those big ones. And I've talked about studies that wouldn't pass ethics boards anymore, where people would be lifting a maximal weight and people would shoot guns or slap on the back, or they're taking amphetamines during the workout to try and activate those larger motor units. So that's a way of, when you're doing your first 6 weeks of strength training, like that's the thing that's really changing quite quickly. And then it kind of takes a bit more time for your muscle structure to actually change. And so when you think about what's happening with the muscle structure, it's those muscle fibers are getting bigger. So that hypertrophy is what we call it. And we're able to basically increase the size of muscle and increase the strength through both of those ways. And so why this is important is when you're thinking about like the neural drive aspect, the big compound movements that Rad just mentioned, they're the ones that are going to really like make your brain switch on, and you're doing these multi-joint movements. You're able to put on like a lot more maximal sort of weight than you would, with a wrist exercise, for example. So that's really like tapping into that neural drive activation, and you're getting a lot of that that flow from your brain out to all of the muscles in your body. So it's really important to try and think about like within a whole week, we're trying to cover as many of the different muscles as possible. So by doing those big compound movements, or sometimes call them like the fundamental movements, like in the primary lifts, that if you do them throughout the week, that you're going to cover all your bases. And then when it comes to then the supplementaries, it's then going in and looking at certain parts of the system. So if you think about the joints as systems, so like a push and a pull, you're in the push, for example, it'd be your pecs and your triceps as the prime movers there. So when you're doing a primary lift, you're going to be activating both of those prime movers at once. But then when you're going into your supplementaries, that's when you think, okay, I'm going to use just part of that system and do a pec fly, for example. There's many pec flies in the Unity Gym program, but that's using just part of the system. So yeah, when thinking about structuring a workout, I'd never want to put just an isolated movement as part of the primary lifts, unless it's something that doesn't get covered in the big compound movements. For example, I often will pair squats with calf raises because they don't interfere with each other, and calf raises aren't used in many of the big compound movements.
Yeah, no, look, Phil, we definitely use pec flies, and I was trying to share my phone screen, but I can't, but it's okay. I'm going to bring up a screenshot of one of the UMS workouts, so that after we've finished discussing what supplementary exercises are, I can show an example of a workout. So yeah, this I couldn't agree more. So we've covered the primary workout, and then you move into supplementaries. And I remember Yani's out of the two of Yani and I, Yani's the programming expert. He's done a lot more work with top coaches around the world, learning how to write good programs. So I've done a little bit of work with them, but a lot of what I learned came from Yani. And I remember when I was asking Yani about the difference between a primary workout and a supplementary circuit, you said something to me along the lines of like 80% of the work is done in the primary workout, and then you just put the icing on the cake in the supplementaries. So for example, if you're doing a bench press and bent over row in your primary workout, so you're really thinking of, like what Phil said, hitting those pecs and deltoids and triceps in those compound lift for the push, and then all the back muscles that are involved in pulling, then when you go to the supplementary circuit, you can just double down a bit.
Stop calling it a circuit.
Okay, so
Not always necessarily
true. It's not always a circuit. So when
you
you go into your supplementary
movements to complement the primary movements.
Yeah, that's right. So you can do things like, for example, a chest fly, a pec fly, and you could do any variation of it to get more volume on the pecs. You've already hit the pecs when you're doing your bench press, and then you can pair that with a bent over lateral raise, for example. We always still try to pair antagonistic movements. So if we're doing a chest fly, which is like this, then we also want to do a bent over lateral raise like that. So we're training opposing muscle systems. And another way you can go about it is you could do some arm work as your supplementary. So you could do some bicep curls and tricep extensions. And it's also where we put in the conditioning for the smaller parts of the body, like for example, rotator cuff work or wrist work. So like wrist flexion and extension, things like that. And yeah.
And I think it's important to drill into why we pair antagonistic muscle groups, because it's not like beyond the obvious, which is that it just promotes balance. And life has, you're always having to adjust to the natural vicissitudes of life. Sometimes things just occur, and you might intend to do 4 perfect workouts in a week with a midweek break, but something happens and you miss the last 2 workouts, or you miss one of the workouts. So let's say hypothetically you've done your pushing movements, and then something happens in your life and you miss the pulling movements. And then next week you go back. What happens over time with these patterns of consistency or lack thereof, you tend to favor certain movement patterns. And I'm sure people listening will relate to this. You have your favorites. Bicep day might be your favorite. Chest day might be your favorite. Very few people favor leg day, or back day, where they're doing pull-ups, because these exercises are just neurologically more challenging. And so you want to remove any tendency to favor movements, because those favorable movements become imbalances in the body that eventually, either in the best case scenario, prevent you from making good strength adaptations, because the body tends to stifle progress when there's a really bad structural imbalance occurring. And in the worst case, it can actually, promote joint glide and instability in the joints, and even, lead to increased risk of injury and postural issues and things like that. So, on the very, very base level, I like to say always pair antagonistic movements, just because it promotes balance in the body. And we refer to this as anatomical structural balance. The structures of each joint are balanced anatomically. But then
just to simplify, just to to try and make it as low jargon as possible, with like, if antagonistic is confusing for you, just think like opposing muscle groups, like the one that does the opposite movement, just to simplify it for people.
Exactly. And then on a more granular level, the pairing of these movements has been proven in many, many studies to actually increase the effectiveness of the exercise, because you tend to be able to get more range in the movement if you load one side of a joint. So let's say you're pushing muscles to failure, you'll get more mobility in the opposing muscles when you go and repeat the next set of exercises. But it also seems to increase the efficiency, and you're able to pack more volume into a workout. So it's not just for a good time effective workout, the way that the body is moving between opposing muscle systems allows higher intensity loads to be maintained throughout the workout. So if you look at a workout that pairs antagonistic muscle groups, opposing muscle groups, versus a workout that does straight sets on the same muscle, same volume, same number of sets, same number of reps, all of that, if all the loading variables are the same, straight antagonistic or opposing muscle sets generally always outperforms straight sets if you look at how much total load is lifted over a workout. So, it's a good experiment to do for yourself. Experiment for this for yourself. Split your push-pull movements to 2 different days, and then combine them and see what you get done, more, what gets done more. And usually what happens when you're doing straight sets is that let's say hypothetically you're doing bench press at 100 kilograms. Your first, for 10 reps, your first set might be 10 reps, then you wait 60 to 90 seconds rest. Your second set, you'll probably only get 8 reps out. Your third set, you'll probably be lucky to get 7 reps out. And your fourth set, you'll probably drop right down to 6. But if you then do a 60 to 90 second rest, but instead of going to bench press, you go to bent over row and do the same thing under the same rest interval. And then once you finish the bent over row, go back to the chest press, you'll probably find that instead of dropping to 8, the second set you might do 9, then the third set you might do 8, and then the fourth set you might do 7. And over the workout period, you've lifted more total volume, total load lifted. And over a year, that looks like an astronomical difference in how much your body's lifting and therefore adapting to that load. So
yeah, and I think it's important to realize with that kind of approach, like you see kind of the bodybuilders classic splits are usually like your the opposite of what we're talking about here, where they'll do chest and bis and back and tris, where it's that kind of like very isolated to like one area on each day, and there's not kind of taking into that consideration so much. And I think that is because you can probably get more volume but at a much lower intensity. Like they're all about time under tension, because that's going to be the thing that develops that hypertrophy. But the important thing to remember with hypertrophy is like hypertrophy doesn't equal strength, and it doesn't necessarily equal improved function and range of motion, like Yani mentioned there. So that's why you do see bodybuilders typically go for this, the opposite approach of what we're talking about, because they don't really care if they're strong or not, or if they're balanced or functional at all. It's just about how they look. So they can kind of do these like very low rest in between the same muscle group over and over again, but they're just lifting at such a low weight, and they're just going for like purely burn rather than the kind of intensity that you need for strength. Whereas when you think about like how powerlifters train, when I was training at base gym with Sebastian Oreb, like they had a nice couch set up and a cafe there, because often you do one set of deadlift and then you have like a 10-minute break before you go back and do your deadlift again sometimes, because it's so like the rest periods between those big primary lifts gives you that chance to recover both like neurologically and muscular wise, to then give that sort of top effort. Because to get stronger, you need to be pushing to that higher limit each time. Like you need to be getting there, and if you have very like low rest periods in between sets, then you're just never going to recover enough to actually push those boundaries. So what I really like about this way that you guys approach it is when you're doing the push, for example, and then you have some mobility, like a flexibility exercise for your lower body, then a pull for your upper body, the pecs and the triceps for that push have had all of those minutes to recover, which is probably more than 3 minutes, maybe even 5 minutes there, before you then have to push again, which means that you can like hit that right intensity. That means you'll actually increase your strength, and not just have this kind of time under tension that leads to hypertrophy, but not necessarily increased strength and function.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good opportunity to clarify that anybody that's listening to this, there are so many different ways to put a workout together, and Phil's just described some considerations that bodybuilders take into why they put their workouts together, and touched on some considerations that powerlifters take when they put their workouts together. 2 very different goals. One is designed to build as much muscle as possible, and one is designed to build as much strength as possible in 3 lifts. So the goal for our workouts is to try and get as much done in a short amount of time as possible. So our goal is to build some muscle, build a lot of strength, functional strength, and flexibility also make people fit and also to overcome injury, because those are the things that we found that everybody, they might want one of those goals, but everybody wants a little bit of all of them. And so the purpose of the workout structure that we're talking about here is to really to make you strong, to make you flexible, make you fit, and make sure you don't get injured and even deal with some older injuries. So of course, if you're listening to this, you might have plenty of questions or plenty of reasons that you would not want to do this split based on your goals. But for the people that want to get those goals that I just talked about, it works really, really well. And
even if you did want to sort of bump more towards strength, like you could do exactly the same split and just have like a slightly longer rest period.
That's right.
That's a way that you can adapt exactly the same structure. Just give yourself a bit more rest, and then if you're thinking like I really need to prioritize strength here, just give yourself a bit more time there. And that might mean that you take a bit of time out of your supplementaries, but you've just got that extra bit of rest. That means you can really push those primaries, and that rest will really help get that intensity. So
yeah, and fun fact about rest with strength training. You're actually only when you talk about strength training, what you're really talking about is you're lifting maximal effort for a certain rep range. So, you're doing 5 reps per set and you're lifting, you're trying to push your 5RM or trying to increase your 5RM, for example. You're only actually ever lifting maximally during your primary workout, because once you've done your 5 sets or however many sets you're doing on your primary movement, when you get into the supplementaries, you're no longer lifting maximal load anymore because you just can't. You're fatigued from the primary workout. So the considerations for longer rest are really only relevant for that first part, for that primary workout. When you get into that supplementaries, even when I'm doing strength training, I'll often do quite short rest periods in the supplementary exercises because I just want to get more volume. It's not about being able to have long rest periods and lift really heavy weights. So if we have a really quick look at this, you might be thinking, well, how does all this look? This is an example of what it looks like in the UMS app. I just took a screenshot of the phase 1, day 1 gym workout for bent arm strength and front splits. So that means BAS is bent arm strength, which is just a way of saying exercises where you bend your arms. So you're doing, a push, the arms are bending when you push. Straight arm strength is when the arms don't bend when you do pushing movements. So when we look at that, the primary workout we have, this is your pull and your push. So we're doing a pull-up variation here, and then you're recovering from the pull-up variation, and then you're doing a push variation, a shoulder press variation, then you're recovering from the shoulder, from the push variation, and then you go back to the pull-up. And the way we recover is that we do lower body flexibility. So that's a hamstring flexibility movement, and that is a hip flexor flexibility movement. So we're even doing antagonistic muscles when it comes to flexibility as well, which is how you develop the front splits. You need flexibility in the hamstrings and flexibility in the front splits. So the way that looks is, that's actually done as a circuit, but it's not a cardio circuit. A lot of people hear the word circuit and they immediately think cardio. It's not cardio. We do that in 5 minutes. This is for people that are limited to an hour. If you've only got an hour to train, we have a clock that goes every 5 minutes, and you'll do your set of pull-ups, and then you come down, do your set of hamstring stretches, and then you go over, do your set of shoulder press, and then you go and do your couch stretch. And usually, if you just go from one to the next, most people get through that with about a minute left, and then you have a minute just to prepare yourself for the next set. And if you could train for longer than an hour, you could push that out to 6 minutes, and that'd be a really cruisy circuit. It's got nothing to do with cardio. And then in this example, we are doing the supplementary exercises as a circuit. Yani's right, you don't always do supplementaries as a circuit, but for efficiency in this program we do. And the reason why is by doing a bicep curl and a tricep extension, so they're antagonistic movements. And then when we go into the rotator cuff work, those biceps and triceps are working. And so by the time we go back to the bicep curl, we do 40 seconds of work and then 20 seconds of rest, so that one round of this gets done in 4 minutes. It just means you can get more done in less time. And it's really all just about being efficient. It's about, for us with the UMS, it's about being able to make people strong, flexible, and fit all within 1 hour. Because most people, what I find is, what Yani and I believe is a flawed approach, is this idea of separating strength and flexibility, or viewing flexibility as something that you do if you've got time at the end of the workout. Because when does that ever happen? When do you ever have time at the end of the workout? So
I think it's important that we caveat that with the fact that it is probably in many books, in many courses that you do, you probably heard that you can't ride two horses with one ass, and you're either stretching or you're strength training, or you're either doing cardio or you're strength training. You don't mix it. This is one of the things that everyone hated about CrossFit originally, that they were just trying to put all of these different sort of workouts together in one, and there's conflicting adaptations occurring there. And so I just want to address that, because I think it's important. There's going to be people listening going, I have heard from very, very authoritative figures in the space that you shouldn't stretch while you're doing a strength workout. And there are some truths to that. And so there's two arguments that I'm going to take here. The first one is what Rad just brushed over there. The reality is, and what we've found, and trust me, we've been doing this for a while now. Both Rad and I started as personal trainers in 2004, December 5th, 2004. And so at the time of recording, it's 2024. So it's our 20th year as coaches. We've seen a lot. We've worked with a lot of different people. We've tried a lot of different things. And what we're doing now 100% produces the best results across the board for the majority of people. Now, there are always going to be individual circumstances where someone has a very specific goal for a very niche objective that you do need to sort of go outside the mold and structure something very tailored to what they need. That said, in most cases, most people who are training for, I like to say we're experts at forging forever bodies. We're not training for a specific sport. We're training people to be able to have a forever body, not a body that they peak at 27 and at 37, they're already telling stories of their yesteryear. Rad and I are both in our mid 40s. We'll be training like this, I reckon, for quite a while, I intend to keep this sort of physique for as long as I can. It's a forever body. So we're not experts at powerlifting. We're not experts at Olympic lifting. We're not experts at anything, but we are very, very good at producing strength in a variety of different environments. And we're pretty damn fit too, and if we went to my girlfriend at the moment is right into yoga. She'd like to drag me along to yoga classes, and I'm generally always people are fairly impressed when they see me perform any sort of stretching or flexibility training, exercises. So what we do works. But on the flip side, there is actually some good sort of research to indicate that when you fatigue the nervous system, the whole adaptation of flexibility training is this resistance from the brain preventing a range of motion that might be harmful to you, might be unstable, might be putting you at risk of injury. So we have this communication stream between the brain and the muscle system through the nervous system that is saying, tense that muscle because I don't want him to go into that level of flexibility just in case we hurt ourselves, And so there's a big aspect of flexibility training that is delaying that inhibition, that body's natural safety mechanism. And it's the same nervous system that's preventing you from accessing that range that is controlling the contraction of a force-producing muscle. And so if you fatigue that nervous system during strength training, you can actually delay the brain's response to what it perceives as risky stretching. Now, risky stretching is what I would like to say occurs when you're running around. A classic example is watching a tennis player lunge for a ball and they almost go into the splits. If you're not trained to do that sort of ballistic jumping and things like that, then you're probably going to tear an adductor or a hamstring, That's what I would say the brain is trying to sort of prevent. But when we're stretching in a controlled environment after doing a proper warm-up, sometimes that restriction, the brain's natural safety mechanism, isn't helping us improve our flexibility. It's doing too good a job at preventing us from harming ourselves. And so what Rad and I have very much piggybacked onto with our unified movement system. By combining strength and flexibility, we're able to fatigue that nervous system and delay that natural safety inhibitor or inhibitor system in the brain, so as to allow us to achieve greater ranges of motion in that controlled, I say controlled because you're not doing anything fast and risky, in that controlled environment. And it actually produces exceptional results. So anyone sitting there listening to us going, you shouldn't stretch and strengthen at the same time, I urge you to open your mind, because there is actually a really, really interesting system in the body here that we're hacking into that is producing really, really good results. And you'll see.
I think the kind of key thing, just so you haven't said there, sorry to interrupt your flow, but the big thing that you're missing there is like that you do is that you're flexing, you're doing upper body strength with lower body flexibility. So it's not like you're getting in, doing a maximal deadlift and then you're doing a maximal hamstring stretch. So I think that's a really key thing that, is really obvious to you guys, but you didn't say there. So I just wanted to.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So we don't ever promote, unless someone's at an absolute beginner level and they're not going to be lifting heavy and their number one goal is flexibility training, then we may do hamstring strengthening first and then hamstring stretching at the end of the workout. But we generally don't promote the lower limb or lower extremity strength and lower extremity stretching in the same workout.
Yeah, I'm talking particularly that primaries when you're doing the alternating between strength and flexibility.
That's right. Yeah. The general UMS format is, you'll be strengthening the upper body and you'll be stretching the lower body, and then vice versa on the following day. And look, this whole nervous system adaptation, fatiguing from the strength training and then delaying or allowing, let's simplify the language, allowing a deeper stretch, it works remarkably well. And people who have been doing yoga and flexibility, practice disciplines for many, many years come in and do 1 or 2 UMS workouts and go, oh my God, my middle splits or my pancake or my back bridge has increased exponentially from 1 week of training. How is this possible? That's how it's possible, because we have this unique way of, I guess, releasing the body's natural handbrake that it's putting on, preventing you from accessing these ranges. It's good fun to have a play with.
Yep. Well, that's it. You heard it here first, folks. The ultimate workout design.
I coined a new phrase during this podcast, which I'm going to use in my marketing now: forging forever bodies.
I was wondering if you'd already started doing that, writing about it, and then you're looking away of cramming that in along with the words.
I just put a note down in my notes.
You're the only person I know who uses vicissitudes in.
I've never heard anybody else use that word before. I had to Google it and make sure he didn't make it up.
You know who I got? You know who I got that from? The late Charlie Munger, who used to talk about it in his investing practice. I read a couple of books, and he uses that word all the time. You've got to prepare for the natural vicissitudes of life.
No, and if you're on one of those word of the day, cram it into a sentence.
I stole it.
Love it.
There it is. Look, tribe, if you've got any questions, hit us up in the comments. Please like and subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. And if you're listening to our podcast, subscribe as well. And
I was going to say, let us know what workouts you're putting together, how you design your workouts in the comments. We'd love to see what you guys are doing and what your goals are. Are you training for muscle hypertrophy like a bodybuilder? Are you training for maximal strength like a power lifter or weightlifter? Or are you forging a forever body like we are, where your main goal is longevity and, optimal health?
Or have you just not really thought about it, and now you're actually considering maybe I should be a bit more specific?
Totally. Yeah. And very quickly before we go, Phil, where can people find you online?
Yeah, probably the easiest is on the socials at Phil White Physio, and my website is philwhite.me if you wanted to get in contact or check out what I'm doing.
Awesome. And we're always encouraging Phil to post these videos on his YouTube channels and things like that. So if this video ends up there, hello everyone from Phil's community.
All right, getting there. We'll see you in our next podcast. Have a good day.